Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and today is actually my 50th birthday. And the plan for this year's birthday game was to play it in an Irish pub in Columbus, Ohio called Fido's. We thought that would be pretty cool because this adventure involves not only characters from Changeling the Dreaming, which features a lot of fairies that tend to be very Irish oriented, but also because it involved the Fianna clan of werewolves from Werewolf the Apocalypse, and they are extremely Irish. But because we record everything in advance, that kind of made things weird. So this is a multi-part story. One part will drop on my birthday, and it's something that we had to then play in advance. But as you are listening to this, we will be in the Irish pub playing the next chapter of the story. If we can, we're going to try to record in the pub. I don't know if they're going to be cool with that or not. Failing that, we will at least take some photos and try to upload them somehow so that you guys can see that. Anyway, before we go any further, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and as always, leave us a comment. That helps us out on our end with the YouTube algorithm, but also we genuinely love hearing from you guys. We have an awesome community here, and that's thanks to you. So thank you so much for being here. So, having said all of that, let's get into it. The prologue to today's story begins where our St. Patrick's Day game left off, at the new Continuum Bar and Grill in Liscarroll, Ireland. If you haven't listened to that adventure yet, check that one out first, otherwise, this one won't make as much sense. That said, when this game begins, a group of Fianna werewolves return from London, England. They decided that the way they wanted to celebrate St. Patrick's Day was with an explosive device because they hate vampires. And there were some vampires in London that the werewolves wanted to get rid of. So they'd placed this device on the bottom of a limousine used by the inner circle of vampires there. And since vampires have a weakness to fire, their attack was extremely successful. After that, to celebrate, they basically drank a bunch of beer, and by the time they get back to the Irish CB&G, they're a bunch of hooligans. And of course, the way they get back there is through the CB&G's notorious bar door, which has this ability to connect to any other bar door anywhere in the world, right? When they walk out of the bar door of the CB&G into the streets of Liscarroll, they're greeted by the sight of several changelings. And right now it's about dawn in Ireland. And out here in the street, the changelings are standing over the burning remnants of some vampire assassins. So the Fianna werewolves ask what happened here. And a goblin named Siobhan O'Riordan tells them that the vampire assassins entered the CB&G and attacked a young clericon named Williog O'Hoban. The werewolves ask if Will's all right, and the changelings say he's recovering from the attack, and a puka named Bonnie O'Hare is watching over him and kind of nursing him back to health. The Fianna Werewolf Pack, by the way, are actually based on the cast of gargoyles. So they consist of the former pack leader, whose name is Hogan. He's a heavy set old man, but like Padar, he is extremely wise with tons of combat experience. And these days, he mostly just acts as a mentor to the younger warriors. Next is Galbraith, who was inspired by Goliath. He's the current pack leader, and he was played by my son, who, by the way, did a great job in terms of characterization. Moving on to the rest of the pack, Galbraith has a wife named Donna, and she was inspired by Demona from Gargoyles. And while most of the other werewolves are part of a group called the Fianna, she is actually something called a white howler. She and Galbraith had this sort of Romeo and Juliet style forbidden love thing going on where they were from packs that don't necessarily usually get along. And it resulted in the birth of a daughter, a female werewolf named Anne, who was based on Angela from Gargoyles. In Werewolf the Apocalypse, for some reason, it is forbidden for werewolves to marry other werewolves. And when they do, the child that results from this union is what is called a metis, or maybe it's metis. That's the thing. When you read this stuff in books, you don't necessarily get a pronunciation guide. You know what I mean? We always said metis. At any rate, so normally other werewolves hate anyone who is a metis, but because Anne was born into this pack, they were around while Donna was pregnant. They were there for the birth and so on and so forth. Because of all that, this particular pack has accepted her as their own, and they're not mistreating her at all, right? The only other member of the pack, by the way, who is not a Fianna werewolf is Lachlan, who is actually a glass walker. He was based on Lexington from Gargoyles, and his code name is Runt. He is the team's computer whiz slash resident tech expert. Next up is the heavy set Brody, who was based on Broadway. He was perhaps the kindest and best liked of all of the wolves, aside from Anne. Then there is the red haired Brogan, who was based on Brooklyn. He was played by Brad, and his personality was similar to that of, like, Raphael from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And while all of these werewolves were born looking human, the only one who wasn't was Braun, who was inspired by Bronx. His mom was an ordinary wolf. So when he was born, he looked like a wolf pup. And throughout the entire game, he stayed in his hispo form, which basically means he looks like a cave wolf or like a huge dire wolf, right? And as was the case in the last game we ran at the Irish Continuum Bar and Grill, there is Padar, the elderly Fianna werewolf, as well as Brian O'Bannon, who is a werebear who the pack has embraced as their own. And last but not least, there is Sean MacArthur. He is actually the son of Sheena, the bartender. Some changelings have a fairy art called Elder Form, which allows them to turn into any species that they've ever met. And so Sean has copied Brian's ability to turn into a werebear. So they both spend pretty much the entire game in their anthropomorphic bear modes. Anyway, so the Goblin Girl fills the pack in on everything that happened in the St. Patrick's Day game and how the Irish changelings had discovered the existence of Dragonkin changelings. The Fianna werewolves initially wonder if the vampires that attacked Liz Carroll were maybe reacting to their attack earlier in the evening on the vampires in London. But the goblin tells them that according to a computer that they stole, a Dragonkin changeling named Edward Jeffries hired these vampire assassins to wipe out everyone in Liz Carroll. So the Irish changelings intend to go eliminate Edward Jeffreys. A troll named Liam tells the Fianna werewolves that Jeffreys owns a mansion in the Virgin Islands. And a redcap named Aiden takes everybody to his armory where they all stock up on weapons. Once they are armed and ready to go, they all go through the bar door with the intention of traveling to whatever bar is the closest to the private island of Edward Jeffreys. Which brings us to the main plot, which actually begins on a boat. This boat was bought a few years ago by a husband and wife who are close associates of Jeffreys. The boat is famous for its pizza, but it also serves alcohol. The idea is that you would either swim up to it to buy a beer, or you would have your boat tether itself to their boat and then board it that way. And then you would eat or drink there. Point being, this boat does have a bar door, but it's on the outside of the boat. And while it's around dawn in Ireland right now, it's the middle of the night here, right? And the boat is closed for the day. And no other boats are docked with this boat right now. So what that means is that when the player characters walk out of this bar door, they have a short drop into the tropical water here. They've never used the CB&G's bar door and had it end up like this, right? So all of the PCs are in the water. And by the way, each time a new person steps through the bar door, they drop onto the people that are like treading water, right? And if that wasn't annoying enough, this island where Edward Jeffreys lives radiates banality. Whatever goes on there is so gruesome that even out here in the water, the changelings begin to take damage from exposure to that much banality. When they left the Irish CB&G, the bartender, Sheena, aka Captain Ireland, gave each one of them a necklace made out of bottle caps from the various beers that were drank there. See, the idea in Changeling the Dreaming is that a changeling basically lives off of happiness and pleasure and stuff like that, right? And so they can go someplace where people are having a good time, whether it is like an amusement park where people are enjoying a roller coaster or something like that, or it can be in a bar, like an Irish bar where everybody is singing together and has a buzz and stuff like that, right? But they can sort of pull that positive energy out of the air, and they can either absorb it themselves right now if they want to, or they can save it for later. And the way they do that is they take that energy and they can place it into an object. But when you want that energy later on, when you take it out of the object, it destroys the object, right? So you don't want to store it in anything valuable. So the idea here is because they're in a bar, the disposable thing is plentiful and small enough that you can take with you is bottle caps, right? So we've been doing this for years in our game, where a changeling in a CB&G will take the good moment that everybody is enjoying and will put that into a bottle cap in the form of energy, right? So each bottle cap, in terms of the game mechanics, it contains 1 point of glamour. And each time a changeling touches that bottle cap to absorb that stored point of glamour into themselves later, right? The bottle cap in question would then sort of sift away into nothing, kind of like the Thanos snap, right? But by all of them doing this right now, they're all treading water, they all are wearing bottle cap necklaces, they all touch a bottle cap, it sifts away into nothingness, and they absorb 1 point of glamour, which helps them get over the initial shock of all of this ambient banality in this area where they are, right? And by the way, the string itself that these bottle caps are on acts as what the Changeling RPG refers to as a token. A token enables a non changeling to see a changeling character for what they really are, right? So think of this as true sight. It's an ability which allows a, a PC to see through illusions. Anyways, so each werewolf is wearing one of these bottle cap necklaces, and the werewolves all start to make climbing checks using their claws. They're all in their Krynos form, which is the tallest form. It's the halfway point, between man and wolf. The only one who is not in Krynos is Braun, who I mentioned earlier, who is always in his dire wolf form, right? Which is called Hispo. But at any rate, so the whole pack climbs up the wet sides of the ship onto the boat, right? Where the guy who owns it, he owns the boat, he sees these werewolves coming up out of the sea, and he opens fire. And he, by the way, is wearing a t-shirt with his company logo on it, which is a little girl eating a slice of pizza. Changelings, by the way, also take banality damage from the boat too, because this guy has a dark secret, which is that he and his wife are actually cannibals. So suffice it to say, the Fianna werewolves can smell this on them, and they charge the guy. He fires his gun at one of them, but misses, and they maul him. The wife screams, but then they take her out too because she's in on it, right? And by the way, this part of the adventure was actually maybe my favorite part because my brain tumor, which is normally a stumbling block in terms of my GM skills, kind of eased up for once. And I sort of like felt like my old self again. And my inspiration for this scene where these wet werewolves were coming up onto the boat in the middle of the night, right? The inspiration was actually the xenomorph from the Aliens franchise. I just used a ton of adjectives to describe everything about it. And I could tell that my players could all actually see this in their minds, right? Um, it, Anyways, it was just one of those moments where it just really, really worked. Anyways, after the bad guys have been dealt with, the werewolves then help the changelings up onto the slippery boat because the changelings had no claws and had been failing all of their climb checks this whole time. Also, since the changelings are taking damage from even being here, the wolf pack helps them back through the bar door again and back to Ireland. After that, Lachlan, the glasswalker werewolf, uses the GPS system on the boat, and he sees that the island of Edward Jeffreys is actually a frequent stop. Since the mansion of Edward Jeffreys is on the northernmost end of his island, they come in from that angle and then they cut the engines a good distance out and they just have the boat coast in silently. The boat softly hits the beach and then the pack disembarks. They use stealth to climb the hill up towards the main house, which, by the way, is pictured in this week's channel art. And most of the pack are very stealthy, except for Sean MacArthur, who fails his role. This was partially because he can turn into any race that he meets, and right now he has turned into a werebear based on Brian O'Bannon, who, by the way, failed his role too, as does Galbraith, the current leader of the pack, who unfortunately got bad dice rolls all game long. Anyway, so the three biggest guys trip the island's alarm system. In his office, Edward Jeffries was waiting to hear back from those vampire assassins that he hired. But of course, he had not heard back from them because the PCs took those guys out last game. But Jeffries doesn't know that. When the perimeter alarm goes off, he gets up and he walks to the head of the stairs just as all of these werewolves are flooding into his house. And because each of the player characters is wearing those bottle cap necklaces, they can see Edward Jeffries for what he really is. He has dragon like features and a snake like face. He uses his chimerical dragon wings and he takes flight. Brody, the fat werewolf, tries to use persuasion to talk the villain into unaliving himself, but Brody fails his role. So in return, the villain uses a devastating power. He casts Oneromancy level 5, also known as Expiation. So he literally turns Brody into a dream. And to try to explain this rather complicated ability, think of it this way. I think all of us have probably had a dream where we wake up and then we totally forget it, right? And no matter how much we try, we just are never going to remember what that dream was about. Well, so likewise, that was the inspiration for how this power worked, right? So during the villain's turn, Brody becomes transparent, tells his friends he doesn't feel so good, and then they watch him fade into oblivion. And then they forget he ever even existed. And having hung around the CB&G with the Irish changelings, the werewolves know that this is something that a changeling is capable of. For instance, Sean MacArthur's parents have done this several times in game over the years. But the PCs have never had this attack turned on them before. So Donna, the White Howler, picks up the bottle cap necklace that Brody was wearing. And she tells the others that since they all had necklaces, and one of the necklaces is laying here on the floor, that means that this villain must have just erased a member of their pack. And the fact that they can't remember their friend's name or what he looked like fills them with rage. And Braun, the dire wolf, gets this amazing roll of the dice, and he dashes up the stairs and then dives into the air, tackling the villain and then mauling him. And then all of the werewolves hack and slash at the bad guy. And despite how insanely tough the bad guy was, they actually take him apart in one round before he gets a chance to erase another member of the pack. And Donna, the White Howler, has an ability which allows her to turn her claws into any hard material, so she turns them into cold iron. She slashes open her prey and she forces that bottle cap necklace into the wound. And the idea here is that if this guy lives on an island that radiates banality, her theory is that for Dragonkin, banality and glamour must be reversed, right? So she thinks that he feeds on banality and therefore it's glamour that would hurt him. And as previously stated, each bottle cap contains 1 point of glamour. In the end, the werewolves are all standing over their prey and he is done for, right? which brings us to the epilogue of the adventure. The Fianna search the island, and among other things, they find a small pyramid. It is made of white marble and has a turquoise sculpture of a serpent wrapped around it, giving the structure kind of a striped appearance. And then on the top of this is a large, round, golden eye that represents the Eye of Apophis. The player characters enter the pyramid thinking that this is basically the entrance to the dungeon. But instead, the player characters realize this is actually just a small structure. They had assumed that they were going to find stairs leading down, and this wasn't going to be a small pyramid at all, but rather a huge pyramid that was under the sea, and that this was just the tip. But that would imply that all the Dragonkin changelings were sort of going to be easy to find and easy to defeat. Instead, now they have to go through the computers here, find where this guy was emailing other Dragonkin changelings, and start hunting them down one by one, which to me felt very poetic for a pack of wolves. Anyways, that was it. That was this part of the story. Like I said earlier, as you guys are listening to this, I will be celebrating my 50th birthday at Fido's Irish Pub, where we will be playing the next part. As for this part, my players were way more into the werewolves than I expected. We'd kind of thrown the werewolves together, kind of willy nilly, really, almost as cannon fodder, because I thought the villain was going to erase way more of them than he did. That was also the reason why we didn't send in the changelings, was because the players had already grown attached to their changeling characters and were worried that half of them were just going to die. So that's why the wolf pack were knockoffs of the cast of gargoyles rather than um, putting a lot of effort into brainstorming and coming up with original characters and so on and so forth. But now the irony is that the players have gotten attached to the wolves as well. And all of the players said multiple times what a great time they had playing this adventure. Hopefully, you guys also had a good time hearing about it. If you did, we would love it if you took a quick moment of your time to smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. And from everybody here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.